Hi everyone, welcome back to Write Better Together and Mechanics Monday. Joining us today is my lovely co-host Kimberly Drymon.
Hello.
We've been talking a lot about character development and building our stories up. So Kimberly Drymon, I understand that you've been working on your characters.
I have for attempting to write my first complete book with all of you. I have started working on my story and developed my characters. I have all my main characters planned out and my support characters also as well planned out. For my protagonist, I have about everything you could think of: her favorite color, her favorite food, her history, her family. Part of the family history has to do with the conflict, so I've gone back quite a bit in family history as well. I've got that ready to go, and my setting, I have that planned, and I know what my main conflict's going to be, and maybe a sub conflict. I've got that worked out. For my character, she's going to be newly divorced, and she sort of lost herself in the past few years, and she wants to find herself again. And she's going back to an old home place that she's not lived on before, but it belonged to some of her ancestors. And she's going there just to kind of find her roots. And she wants to do something for herself as well. She's always wanted to have a Christmas shop, so she's going to open up a Christmas store in this town, famous for its little antique stores. And she's going to go along and find a mystery about her family history and going to try to figure it out in the story. So it's about time to start writing, as Peggyann Kennedy told us last time. And I have a few questions before we start to write. I was thinking about them and wanted to ask. May I ask a few
Please
questions?
do.
Well, the first question I wondered was, how do you decide what point of view, like first person or second person, when you're getting ready to write?
So it depends on the kind of story that you're looking to write and how you want your characters, what you want your characters to know and not know. So like first person is really good for getting into your character's psyche and I don't know, just telling your character or telling your reader everything that you know about your character. Your your reader knows your character pretty well in the first person and I don't know, it's a lot of eyes and views and everything.
And you can share more inner thoughts of that character, right?
Right.
More complexity
Right.
in the
Yes.
character.
Yes. Thank you. More complexity, but the downside is the reader doesn't really get a lot of what is going on within the story. All you know is everything that your character knows. You don't know anything outside of that. So if your character, if you want your character to know something about, say, a party going on somewhere, someone has to tell your character about it. So there's that. And second person is very rarely used unless it's like literary fiction, experimental kind of thing.
And what exactly? Give us an example of second
Okay,
person.
so it's one example I'd give is How to Talk to Your Mother by Lori Moore, I think. It's basically that story is just basically a list of things and it's very, like as I said, experimental and all, but basically it's just like saying you wake up and brush your teeth and get yourself a cup of
Oh,
coffee. So it's all told from like
not
your
natural.
perspective, right?
Yeah.
So it's very different. But and so if you're interested in something like that, go for it. But I don't know if I'd use it for like writing, say, a fantasy novel or something like what you're doing. But third person is one of the ones that's really popular. A lot of people use it. I read a book recently called Dune that used third person. I think he used omniscient. There are two types of third person point of view. There's limited and omniscient. Limited is basically kind of like first person. It doesn't use the I's and me's and such, but it still uses third person pronouns he, she, they, them, whatever. But it does kind of basically do the same thing. It's kind of like a bubble or a room or something. Your character still is very limited in their knowledge, and you're limited in what you see within the story based on what that character sees. But omniscient is more widespread. Like you get to see a lot more of other different characters, and that's pretty cool. But I think that's kind of what this book that I read recently did. There was some kind of betrayal plot going on, and the reader kind of knows everyone's thoughts about what's going on, and you kind of know what's about to happen, which is kind of different because usually that kind of thing comes as a shock and a surprise. But it's kind of an interesting perspective.
Well, how do you choose one? We know you can eliminate second person because
Yeah.
it's rare. So which is better, first or third?
Again, it depends on the kind of story that you want to write. As I said, like you might not want your character to know everything, so maybe first person would be good. Or if you do kind of want your character to know a little more, if you want there to be a little bit of distance from the character, third person might be good. So that's one thing to consider. And yeah, does that help any?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So, a second question: what about legal issues when you're dealing with real people or real places mentioned in your book? For instance, my character's going to go to a real place and have a real business. Well, the business isn't real, but in the middle of a town with real businesses. And I do want to have a couple of characters in there that might, like, say, for the mayor of the town, for example, I'm not going to use the current mayor, but I wouldn't want to insult the current mayor if there's any similarities.
Right. So one thing you can do is you can fabricate everything and make up completely different characters in a situation like that. Or you can kind of sort of use maybe similar, like some of the same characteristics as some of the people, but make it a little different. Kind of still fabricate enough to where that person wouldn't be recognizable. And another thing, I am not a lawyer. Please take what I say with a grain of salt, and maybe if you're interested, consult a lawyer yourself. But I did meet a lawyer friend at the WriterCon retreat, and she said that in order to like be sued or be liable for any sort of issues that this sort of thing might cause, you would have to do damage to the person that you're writing about. Like you would have to, what's the word, defame their, like you would have to say something.
Defamation of
Yes,
character.
defamation of character. You'd have to do something like that, or or just say something really really terrible about them, and yeah, basically destroy their reputation. That would be cause. But as long as you don't do that and you're just talking, like, say, in my memoir, if I were talking about people in the Navy, it's kind of my experience and the way I remember things. And I think I would be careful and kind of change a lot of the characteristics of their personalities. And of course, changing their names. You never use real names of real people in
Unless it's
books.
historical fiction
Yes,
or
yes,
biography, something like
if
that.
you're writing about Queen Elizabeth or Catherine the Great, things that could be backed up by actual fact, that is totally fine. But I would recommend being careful about that sort of thing, though. But William Bernhardt, he said something kind of funny when we were having this discussion at the WriterCon retreat. He said that like, what person is going to raise their hands up and say, "Hey, that terrible evil person is me. That was me." You're not
Yes.
gonna say that, but still, you do want to be careful about that. Does that help any?
Yes, it does. So I'm going to use all different names. I'm not going to base any of my characters on real people. And if I think there's any similarity, I'll make sure to change it enough so it doesn't seem that way. And my goal is to make it, if they're real people at all, I'm even referring to or thinking of in a book, to make sure they're positive.
Right.
If I want to have an evil person, it's going to be a completely fabricated person, as you said, to
Yeah.
be on the safe side.
Yes.
Okay. So another question I had, you mentioned last time we were talking about conflict and needing to have that in the story. Could you tell us a little bit more about plot structure and how much of it we need to have before we start actually writing?
Okay, so for you, I would highly recommend getting as much as possible, if not all of it, because I know that you're a planner, a plotter, I guess you'd say. So that would be really helpful for you as you're writing. But I don't know, it depends on how you write. If you're like me and you're kind of a little bit of both plotter and you just kind of sit there and write as soon as you can. But I would recommend having as much as you can. That does help, and it makes things a little more organized, and especially in just in your head and your mind. But I don't know. For me, I just like writing and letting the characters write, like direct the story for me. But as far as plot structure goes, I think I talked about this before, but I will do a really quick review of what they are.
Don't be too quick because I'm really needing to learn this since I'm getting ready to start writing. I
Okay.
need to know what I'm doing.
So, as far as plot structure goes, let's see, there are actually a bunch of different types of plot structure. I recently learned this, but the one that I've always kind of followed and thought of. It's called the Freytag's Pyramid, I think. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but there are a bunch of others. There's another one called The Hero's Journey. So think Odysseus or Hercules, or Moana, even the Disney's Moana movie. Like the hero sets out on a journey and encounters difficulties and comes back changed. And let's see, then but the Freytag's pyramid thingamajig, that is the one that I usually kind of think of in my head when I'm writing. So you have the introduction or exposition, which is basically just setting up your scene. You're introducing the conflict, the characters, all of that good stuff. And then there's going to be an inciting incident, which is where the conflict comes in, kind of the spark that starts.
Okay, you just mentioned the exposition, you introduce the conflict. So you don't introduce the conflict at the beginning. You're
Okay, yeah.
introducing characters and setting the scene, so to speak,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then the next part, you introduce the conflict.
Yeah, my bad.
Okay.
I misspoke.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah. So the inciting incident is kind of where you introduce the conflict. And then the rising action is kind of where the conflict continues to build. And the climax is like where the story and the conflict itself comes to a head and where everything just kind of goes crazy. And the falling action is kind of the immediate consequences of that climax. And then the resolution denouement is, yeah, denouement is the resolution where everything is kind of tied up and the story kind of ends from there. Does that help make sense?
Yes, it does. Now, how much of that do we have to have planned out before we start writing?
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Um, I would recommend as much as you can, but at the same time, don't get too stuck in that. As I said before, it's easy to get bogged down in the details, and sometimes you do need to just start writing and let some things fall into place while you're writing, but that's just me. Maybe you're more like Kimberly Drymon here, who would rather have everything all planned out first. So depends on how you write. Experiment. If it doesn't work for you, just planning, maybe try writing a little bit. If that doesn't help, maybe try to do a little more planning. I don't know.
I think for me, I'm going to start working on an outline where I plug in all those parts of the plot structure, at least a brief word or two, just to give me an idea and a skeleton of what to follow. But now we've got our character development worked on. We've been doing that for a few weeks, and hopefully you've got an idea of what your conflict should be. So let's work on actually writing and trying to get at least a paragraph written before our next meeting. How do we go about doing that? How do we actually start with our first bit of writing?
Okay, this is my favorite part, the actual writing part. So when you first start your book or story, no matter what you're writing, if you're writing an essay for school, you want to have some kind of hook, something that interests your reader and makes them want to keep reading. Because if it's a boring sentence and it makes no sense to them, they're going to probably put it down. So you want something that intrigues them, maybe a question or a mysterious, just strange, odd statement or something, just something that gets their interest. And I did have one sentence of one book that I wanted to share because it's really good and kind of gives you the idea of what I'm talking about. It's called The Florentine Poet by none other than William Bernhardt.
Oh,
So, yes, I really, really like this first sentence because it does make you want to keep reading. Just before midnight, I learned why the churches in the San Frediano district are always closed on Christmas Eve.
So we want to know why the churches are closed on Christmas Eve now. Yes.
Right.
That's a good sentence.
It's kind of foreshadowing maybe a little bit, just makes you want to keep reading. So there's that. And let's see, what else is there? Maybe you could start off with some dialogue or something of that sort. You want to also make the character very strong and or at least showcase what your character is kind of like. Like if your character is totally clueless or if they're, I don't know, a fighter or I don't know whatever their characteristics are, you want to showcase that, showcase a little bit of humor, make them likable or unlikable, whatever that character is going to be. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're ready to start writing. So join me as I write at least my first paragraph, maybe even my first chapter by next Monday, and I'll share it with you and we'll help each other because we write better together, don't we?
Yes, we do. we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you all very much for watching and for listening. And please follow along on Wednesday as we interview another writer. And thank you all very much. Oh,
Watch us on YouTube,
yes.
like and
Yes,
subscribe,
please like and
please.
subscribe.
Please, it helps a lot. And give
Thank
us
you.
your comments. Let us know if you have some story ideas, anything you want to share about your main character or conflict, or
Or if you have any questions about anything that maybe I haven't explained well, or something that you're interested in or curious about, or that you need help with,
and we'd
please
love for
let
you
us
to
know.
share your first sentences with us of
Yes,
your new story.
that would be awesome.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.